We're here with Ross Fenstermaker, AGM of the world champion Texas Rangers. Congratulations.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me
on.
Thanks for having me.
And, I'm really interested we've been interested in talking to people about how they got to where they are and their paths through baseball. Because, in some ways, this is a hiring, this is like a industry convention where people get hired and people come to want to get hired. So you played at UC Davis
briefly,
and you were bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Me too. But I didn't even play at Davis. So what was your position?
I pitched.
Oh, okay. Sweet.
Or I threw.
And
how about we call that?
A little bit of a deal with the Mariners for a little bit.
Yeah. Internship with the Mariners in 2009 and then Texas ever since.
And then what were your different roles coming up through the Texas organization?
Yeah, I've worn quite a few hats. So general baseball operations internship led to pro scouting out in the field, led to international cross-checker, led to pro director, international director, and most recently AGM overseeing international scouting and player development.
So pro director and international director, those scouting titles.
Yep.
Baseball operations, I think we've had this thrown around a little bit. With some of our interviews we've done, what is the difference between what is baseball operations?
It's basically the business of baseball. So making sure that, everything in terms of filling out rosters, finding players, acquiring players, developing players, putting the rosters together throughout the minor leagues, leading up to the major league club. Obviously scouts have to find those players. Coaches have to develop those players. Somebody has to supervise all of this, make sure that it's an efficient process, and you ultimately land with, the 26 best guys that you can, and hopefully it leads to a world championship.
So it's like filling out rosters, being part of the process of putting people at the right level, putting players at the right level, making sure you have the right amount of coaches in each place. It's sort of like making sure things work right.
Yeah.
Operations.
Yeah, I think I think you said it well.
Yeah.
You're identifying players that have professional talent, and then you're finding coaches that have the.
Oh, so there is a little bit of an evaluation component.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's interesting because there's been a little bit of tension as we've talked to people about getting your foot in the door and whether or not just getting your foot in the door and getting into an organization is good enough, or if you might take the wrong path in.
Yeah.
And so how hard was it for you to kind of hop from operations to scouting?
I think it was an interesting challenge. So, the start of my career was just general baseball operations exposure. And then to go into scouting, what was unique, it's not so unique anymore, but at the time, I think I was 23, 24 years old. There wasn't many pro scouts in their 20s. So it was a pretty significant jump to go out in the field and evaluate players. But I felt, in terms of my aspirations in the game, it was important for me to be able to understand the evaluation side rather than just the business side of the game, and go out there and recognize how challenging it is to evaluate players at all different levels of the game, and, be able to empathize with our evaluators and the challenges that go into that walk of life, so to speak.
Run me through a little bit, how you got that opportunity, how you convinced, was there an interview were you just did people just there's an evaluation part of operations and they were impressed that you had made some good calls?
I think so.
You're
involved in the draft process when you're in the office, so you get to see players, video, you get to read reports, you get to talk players.
But it's not like they're, hey, 22-year-old intern in the operations department, should we draft this guy?
No, definitely not that.
So kind of how do you make an impact?
Well, it's one of the things I love about the Rangers is, Josh Boyd was my supervisor at the time, who's still an AGM with us here now, a huge mentor of mine, would talk players with me all the time. AJ Preller was around, who's the general manager with the Padres. John Daniels created that culture. So, I got opportunities as a young intern to have these conversations with, pretty influential people in the organization. They realize, hey, I think this guy might have an opportunity to evaluate and, make some calls on players and go down that track and that path. And they believed in me and gave me that opportunity. And
it sounds like there's a little bit more opportunity for that in operations, because at least you're around all the people that are doing these things. It would be harder to, say, for example, get a job in, ticket sales or something and make that jump, because Boyd's not hanging out with the ticket sales people. Like, let's have a conversation about these players. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think there's some separation in terms of the actual business side and then the baseball operations side of the game. So I think that's a harder transition to make. It certainly happens, and there's a lot of great stories out there of people that have done that. I was lucky that I started in baseball operations and had exposure to decision makers and people in influential roles that were looking to hire, directors of departments, and that access and exposure gave me the opportunity and a pathway to continue down the route that I'm on, and I've been on ever since. So
yeah, and when you're looking for the next Ross Fenstermaker,
yeah,
and you're hiring, sounds like you have in your purview you've got scouting and development, and you're looking at a lot of different roles that you could hire for. To some extent, the next Ross would, maybe you hire him for the wrong role first, you hire them for one role first and you find the right place for them eventually. So doesn't that have something to tell you about, like, the hiring process? How do you think about the hiring process when you're looking? Are you looking very specifically for these skills that are going to fit this role, or are you looking for a general skill set that you think might help the team, and maybe they'll help the team this way later and this way later, but just they seem like they could help us, they have a good baseball mind, or whatever?
I think it depends on and what you're hiring for. So if you're talking about entry level applicants or positions, I think you're looking for people that are passionate about the game. I look for people that are very curious, because I think curiosity is an indicator of growth. People that want to learn about different aspects of the game, but also, are out there doing things, are producing work, writing a blog, or, doing research projects, or going to the field and scouting and introducing themselves to people. Like, there's so many different ways, coaching, that you can access and show work, and show that you're passionate about it, versus just applying for a job and hoping that somebody sees a resume and that appeals to them.
Yeah. And so the work that you're doing to identify those is often just looking. It's not as much maybe sorting through resumes as it is almost sorting through someone's public resume. So what they're doing out in the public space.
I think the concept of resume in baseball is outdated. I think your resume is your work that you produce that's available to the public. So research project, blog posts, scouting information that you could share, proof of concept coaching. It doesn't matter where you coach. Coaching is pretty similar no matter what level you're coaching. It's about leading and inspiring players to be the best versions of themselves and finding unique ways to help them optimize their abilities, getting the most out of them. So I don't think that there's a perfect path for anyone. These routes to working in baseball operations, these positions are quite circuitous in a lot of ways. And I think we just look for commonalities in the types of people that we're looking to hire, and you provide them opportunity in the right environment, and you get to evaluate them and see how they can grow and progress.
Are you getting poached pretty hard right
now? Me? Or our excuse me. I said no. Our organization. We've had a few people leave, but I tell our people all the time, our goal here is to have that happen, because either we don't have the position available for you, and if that position is available elsewhere, and that's something that you aspire to be or do,
I think remember us. Yeah, you remember us fondly,
but it's fulfilling to see young employees enter the organization, develop them, and then they're ready for bigger and better. And my hope is that one day I get to work with a lot of these people and they hire me. And, we want to create, as much as we want to create talent on the field, the pipeline, we also want to create talent in the front office as well. And, I think we'll be really proud as we take a step back and we see, we've got AGM, senior directors, GMs, all across the game that were members of our organization at some point. So
came out of the Rangers tree.
That's right.
So it's interesting that you're in a really great position in terms of you won.
Yeah.
And yet the work always continues in terms of hiring new talent, and you're always looking for new people. And yet, and you've done such a great job, player development wise with your young hitters. I mean, that lineup is so nice. And the young players that have come up, I mean, there's even people that didn't even really contribute fully at their fullest capacity that are just knocking on the door. Like, y'all didn't even play Ezekiel Duran like that much, dude. I'm like, he's a really good player. So you know, there's so many good players coming up through the pipeline. You want to make sure that you continue doing that and continue turning out new hitters. If you wanted to improve something like maybe your pitching pipeline, yeah, it's obvious that like the culture can't be necessarily the problem in the full organization, because you're doing some things right. So when one thing is like a little bit behind other things, you just get more attention. Do you is it about people? Like, how are you thinking about pitching development right now generally in terms of how you might look to improve it?
I think that's a great question. I do think it's an area for us to continue growing. On the hitting side, we had an additional year with some of the folks that are in place between Tim Hires and Donnie Ecker at the major league level, and the continuity throughout the entire organization. There's a lot of familiarity with one another, which I think has bred success throughout the minor leagues on that side of things. And nothing but the ultimate credit to Kip Fag and the scouting group for the continuity between the departments in terms of what we can develop well, you know, and then drafting good players with the right makeup and intangibles to get the most out of them and entering our system. So I think that's really firing on all cylinders, and I think we'll continue to move forward with that. On the pitching side, you know, Mike Maddox coming in year one, we won the World Series. I think we're trying to get continuity throughout the entire organization, adding the right people in the right roles, making sure that the system is designed in the same way that the hitting side is designed, and also recognizing the challenges of pitching. Like, pitching is a non-linear development path. Hitting is, I think, in a lot of ways, an innate skill, like you know, but like pitching is challenging.
3 miles an hour in a Kansas City Royals.
Oh boy, yeah. No, I mean,
Jersey.
Yeah. So, I mean, it worked out for both parties.
Yeah,
we had Chapman, we won the World Series, but I mean, I am the biggest fan of Cole Reagans, and I wish him nothing but success. I still talk to him to this day, and just it's exciting to see him continue forward. But yeah, you know, he remade himself, and I think we're working on ways that we can do that internally and have our hands on that. And it's just a process to grow, but we're fully invested in there, and we're moving in the right direction. I
hear in there though, you're talking about continuity. I think this is the hardest thing about player development. So I've talked about organizations as tankers. You got so many people, you have so many coaches and staff and players. If you think about it, you're talking about hundreds of people that make up the culture and the people that are in your organization. If there is something you want to change, it's not going to happen in 1 year.
No.
And yet the pressure that we in the media put on you, or the pressure of winning, the pressure of playing or being in an industry where results are very obvious and are counted in wins and a very sort of like, it's just very obvious and it's posted everywhere and everyone knows how many games you won last year. So, you know, there's this pressure that's yearly.
Yeah.
And so we've seen some teams hire, try to change, and maybe 2 years into the process, I'm not going to name names, but like 2 years in the process, be like, well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
And let these people go. I don't know what the question is. It's just like,
well, I think there's two things that stand out.
Like, how do you deal with that yearly pressure, but also wanting to give the people you put into place a little bit of time to change the processes that you're changing?
Well, I can promise you that one thing that typically buys you time in this industry is winning the World Series.
Right. Yeah. So you got a couple of
hopefully we got a little bit of time. But the reality is there's two things that are going on here. I actually think we as an organization have been relatively successful at bounce back major league pitchers. Yeah. So optimization at the major league level and getting more out of them. I think the development path takes longer, and we're in about year 2 of this. And I hopefully these
making some changes there.
Yeah, hopefully these seeds continue to bear fruit as we have more and more time, and hopefully we bought ourselves some time with, you know, our recent success at the major league level. But I think it takes time, and we're on the right path. But I have not. It's unique in that the interest in the minor leagues and some of the top prospects, the way that it's covered in the minor leagues, it's more instant gratification when player development is a process.
Yeah.
And like we go back to the hitting example, I think hitting, there are some innate aspects of hitting that you have bat to ball ability. You kind of do or you don't. In pitching, like I said earlier, it's non-linear and like it takes time. So I think they're on different tracks, but they're examined and evaluated in the same way. And I think it's just a little bit different. And over time, I'm confident that we're on the right path, and we're going to continue to move this thing forward. So
yeah, I think one of the things that's super important though is I'm a big fan of if you don't measure, you don't know. So, you know, some organizations will not even know how well they're doing in their own process because they don't necessarily have the key performance indicators that they've all agreed to measure themselves.
Yep.
Like, so on some level, you need to agree to some, and that's maybe where culture comes in.
Yep.
You need to agree to some commonly held values, and here values, there's another word for it, statistics, commonly held numbers that you guys believe in, that you kind of let coaches and coordinators know that, like, this is how you will be evaluated, and not necessarily, it could be strikeouts minus walks. I mean, that's a very simple one, but like, you know, whatever it is, it's not necessarily going to be ERA.
Yeah.
It might be, you know, certain key performance indicators that allow you to be like, well, it has only been 2 or 3 years, but we haven't seen performance in these indicators that we agreed would be kind of the way that people would be measured. So does that allow you to kind of be a little bit quicker?
Yeah.
In
So
understanding how well the process is going?
I think that's a great point. So we have our KPIs on the pitching side and the hitting side, and everybody knows them. They're universally known throughout our organization. One aspect of that I think you just touched on is, and you've done a lot of work in your space on pitching models. So stuff models and location models and pitching models in general. So we have accelerated those efforts over the last few years, but they're constantly updating and they're constantly evolving. They're getting better and better over time. So in some ways it's dangerous because it's slightly a moving mark, but I think it's moving from, 80th entile best outcome to 90th entile best outcome. So you're going in the right direction. You're still in the right space, but we have our consistent tried and true statistics and KPIs that we rely on, but we're also progressing forward with some of these more advanced models and teaching our coaches how to coach to these models and how to optimize players. So that's where the process really takes time, where it's new and unfamiliar to a lot of folks, but familiarizing them and accelerating that process ultimately leads to quicker returns.
I think it also leads to one of the most difficult lines to walk in player development, which I'm sure, you'll be familiar with this sort of thinking, which is just that, you want to give players the best of what you've got. So you want to say, hey, this is what we believe are the best ways to coach you. These are we think are the most important stats and metrics. These are the things that we think matter to your future success. And they're not the same as they were 5 years ago. So we might have been wrong 5 years ago. And 5 years from now, we might have different ones. And yet, trust us that this is the best of what we have now. So there's like a little bit of like, you have to trust that we're giving you the best, but we also have to keep enough of an open mind to improve and get to what's going to be better in 5 years.
Yeah, I would hope that our players would substantiate what I'm about to say in terms of our culture. I always address them, and our coaches address them. We are only here to serve you in your career. Like, it's not about us. You are the talent. Like, our jobs are to be here for you and help you be the best version of yourself. So with that is the humility aspect of, we don't know everything, but we're going to do everything in our power to present what we think is most important for you and be thoughtful updaters over time as we learn more and say, maybe that isn't as relevant as it was 3 years ago now that we know this. But there are things that are unpredictable. I don't think 10 years ago we were talking about artificial intelligence and influence on pitch design and pitch shapes and pitch optimization. And there'll be something in 10 more years that I'm not familiar with right now, but I promise you I'll research it and try to find out for our players, because that's my job and role and responsibility.
Right. Yeah.
So
thanks for coming by and talking to us about all these things.
Thanks
I think you're in the most fascinating space in baseball. I think that there's still opportunity for teams to improve in player development, and I think it's a big differentiator for people the teams that want sustained success. It's perhaps, I think, one of the most important things. So do you feel that way about player development, and that's an important part of your day-to-day job?
I do. Yeah. I think it's such a unique space. You can make a huge impact on players' lives, both as people and players, and then the organization impact.
Yeah. Once you help someone get to the major leagues, they'll love you for life.
I mean, there are many things that are gratifying and fulfilling in this game, but seeing players actualize their dreams and hoist trophies that have come through your system. I mean, it's second to none. So
that's awesome. Well, congratulations again.
Thank you, Eno. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.